Gemma was standing in the frozen food aisle at 11:30 at night, holding a bag of edamame like it had personally disappointed her. "These," she said, turning the bag over, "cost $6. $6 for beans that someone already half-cooked and then froze again out of spite." I was 2 steps behind her with a basket that already had milk, bread, and the specific brand of pasta sauce she'd texted me about 3 times on the drive over. "They're convenient," I said. "They're a scam." She put them in the basket anyway. That was Gemma. She complained about a thing and then kept the thing. She'd been doing that for as long as I'd known her, which at this point was close to 5 years and somehow felt like longer. The no frills on Bloor was almost empty this late on a Thursday. One employee pushing a flatbed cart near the cereal aisle. A guy in a Leafs jersey, reading nutrition labels on protein bars. The overhead lights had that particular late-night quality, where everything looked slightly too bright and slightly too real, like the grocery store version of a fever dream. Gemma had called me at 10:45 because her fridge had stopped working. Not slowing down, not making a weird noise, fully stopped. She'd opened it to get yogurt and found a container of slightly warm leftovers and a block of old cheddar that was now just cheese at room temperature. "Everything's going to be fine," she'd said when I picked up. Which meant nothing was fine. 20 minutes later, I was at her apartment on Palmerston, helping her figure out what could be moved to a cooler with ice and what had to go. Her landlord had been called and was apparently looking into it, which in landlord language meant nothing would happen before Monday. So here we were. Emergency grocery run. Late Thursday, 2 people who had been friends since a grad school orientation mixer, where she'd handed me a cracker with brie on it and said, "You look like you haven't eaten since the flight." I hadn't. I told her so. She handed me 3 more crackers. That was 5 years ago, and I still hadn't paid her back for the crackers. She'd never let me forget it either. In the produce section, Gemma stopped in front of a display of apples and frowned like she was being asked to make a very serious decision. She was still in what she called her home clothes, which were gray sweatpants and an oversized flannel shirt that I was pretty sure used to live in my closet. I had one of those. I thought I lost it during a move. I had not lost it during a move. It had simply migrated to Gemma's apartment and become hers. The way that things around Gemma tended to become hers over time. A phone charger. Half my Sundays, the back half of my brain that was always doing a quiet check on whether she was okay. "Honeycrisp or Gala," she said. "Honeycrisp." Bold choice for 11:30 at night. "It's always Honeycrisp. What if I wanted Gala, you asked me?" She put 4 Honeycrisps in a bag and tied it. "You're very confident for someone whose fridge works." "My fridge works great, actually. Don't brag." She moved toward the dairy section. "It's unattractive." I followed her, carrying the basket, which had gotten heavier. She kept adding things and I kept carrying them, which was not something we'd ever formally agreed on. It had just become the arrangement. Gemma and I had met the way a lot of people meet people who end up mattering. At a moment when I wasn't paying attention, the orientation mixer for the urban planning program at U of T had been held in a room that was slightly too hot and had one of those cheese and cracker arrangements that nobody wanted to be seen eating alone from. I'd been standing near the table, looking like I was reading my email, when I was actually just waiting for someone to talk to. Gemma appeared beside me, handed me a cracker with brie, and said what she said. And I laughed, and she laughed, and then we talked for 2 hours while the rest of the room did the thing grad students do at mixers, which is mostly stand in clusters and say the word thesis a lot. We ended up in the same 2 seminars. We started studying at the same coffee place on Spadina. She had a system for notes that was better than mine, and she shared it without being asked. I proofread her first major paper because she said she couldn't see it anymore, By November, we were the kind of friends who texted each other random things at random hours and didn't find it strange. The years after that did what years do. Program ended. Jobs started. We ended up in the same city, which hadn't been guaranteed, but it happened. I was working for a planning consultancy in the West End. She was at a non-profit doing community development work in Scarborough. We were still the people who texted random things at random hours. We were still the people who called each other first. Most people thought we were together. Her coworkers assumed it. My neighbor had asked once, while Gemma was helping me carry boxes up to my apartment, if she was the girlfriend. Gemma had said, "Not currently," so fast and so cheerfully that my neighbor had walked away confused, which was also accurate. I never corrected people quickly enough either. That was probably its own data point, and I'd been ignoring the data for years. In the dairy aisle, Gemma picked up a container of yogurt and checked the date with the focus of someone diffusing something. 4 days, she said. That's fine, 4 days before it expires. I won't finish it in 4 days. Then get a smaller one, they're the same price. She looked at me over the container. Why are they the same price? Grocery store economics. Grocery store crimes, you mean? She put it back and picked up the smaller one, then put that back and took the large one again. I did not point this out. I had learned a long time ago which of Gemma's decision loops were worth entering and which ones you just waited out from a respectful distance. My mom called again, she said, while not looking at the yogurt. Yeah? She wants to know if I'm seeing anyone. She put the yogurt in the basket. 3rd time this month. She used the phrase, getting on with things, like I'm a weather system that needs to move along. Her last relationship had ended about 14 months earlier. The guy had been perfectly fine in every measurable way, and Gemma had ended it anyway, which she explained to me at the time as, it just felt like homework. I hadn't asked more questions. I didn't know how to ask more questions without getting too close to territory that I hadn't given myself permission to be in. What did you say? I told her I was focusing on my career. She made a face. She said, "Oh, the way people say, oh, when they think that's the wrong answer." Is she wrong? Gemma looked at me then. Not the quick look she used when she was deciding something, but the longer one. The one I'd learned to not hold too long. Ask me a harder question, she said. We moved through the aisles. Pasta, canned tomatoes, a box of crackers she picked up and then put down and then came back for. By the time we got to the checkout, the basket was full enough that I had to carry it with both hands. The cashier was a teenager who looked like she was running entirely on willpower and maybe one energy drink. She scanned things without making eye contact. The total came out to just over $90. Which, Gemma clocked immediately. I'll get it, I said. No, you won't. Gemma, Daniel. She had her card out already. My fridge broke, not my bank account. I know, but you drove me here at midnight and carried my groceries and you haven't complained once. That is the payment. The cashier, without looking up, said, she's got a point. Gemma smiled at her. Thank you. No problem. The machine beeped. Have a good night. We bagged everything and carried it out into the October night. The air had that particular Toronto October quality. Not quite cold enough for a real coat, but cold enough that you remembered you should have brought one. Gemma had a jacket. My flannel shirt was somewhere in her apartment. I was wearing a hoodie that was doing about 60% of what it should. You're cold, she said. I'm fine. You're doing the thing where you pretend not to be cold. I don't have a thing. You have several things. She shifted the bag to her other hand. You hunch forward slightly when you're cold and pretend you're just thinking. I looked at her. You've been cataloging my things? Hard not to when you're very consistent. She bumped her shoulder into mine. It's almost charming. We walked back toward my car. The street was quiet in that specific way late Thursday streets in Toronto get. The restaurants closed. The bars still technically open but winding down. A streetcar going by half empty with its lights on. A raccoon sat beside a recycling bin on the next block and looked at us like we were the ones in the wrong place. Bold, Gemma said to the raccoon. The raccoon did not move. Respect, she added. I put the bags in the trunk and we got in. The heater took a minute to kick in, the way the heater always took a minute. Gemma had been in this car enough times that she knew to wait without mentioning it. She put her feet up on the dash, which she also did every time. You don't have to drive me back, she said. I drove you here. I can take the streetcar. At midnight. With groceries. I've done it before, I know you have. I checked the mirror and pulled out. I'm driving you back. She didn't argue. She turned the radio down to a level where it was technically still on, but really just a presence, rather than actual music. Outside, the city moved past in the way it did late at night, quieter but not quiet. The lights of Bloor Street giving way to the residential blocks near her place, with their porches and their recycling bins lined up neat. 14 months, Gemma said. I glanced over. Since, Ryan. She was looking out the side window. My mom made it sound like that's a long time to be on my own. Is it? She thought about it. I don't really feel like I've been on my own. I didn't say anything to that. My brain said several things, but none of them made it out. I turned onto her street and found a spot half a block down from her building, which, in this neighborhood at this hour, was almost miraculous. We carried the groceries up to her second-floor apartment. The fridge was still off. I could tell, because the hum was gone, which was a noise I hadn't known I'd registered until it wasn't there. She'd set up the cooler in the kitchen, ice from the corner store inside it, the essentials transferred over. The rest of the apartment looked like a normal Thursday evening. Shoes by the door, a book face down on the couch, a mug on the coffee table that had probably started the night as tea and ended it as ambient decoration. We unpacked the bags together. She knew where things went. I handed, she placed. It had the rhythm of something practiced. At some point she put on the kettle, because apparently we were having tea, which was fine. I sat at her kitchen table and she moved around the small kitchen, and I had the thought that I'd had before, and always managed to talk myself out of. That this was easy. This specific thing. This kitchen, this hour, this arrangement we'd built without ever deciding to build it. She set a mug in front of me and sat across the table. Okay, she said. Why are you still single? The question landed like she'd set something heavy down on the table between us. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my body needed somewhere to put the surprise. You're leading with that. I'm not leading with anything. We're already here. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I'm asking. I looked at the tea. I had the answers I always used. Busy with work. Not really looking. Nothing has clicked. I'd said them enough times they came out smooth, pre-worn, ready to deploy. I'd said them to her before, in other kitchens, other hours. But it was midnight, and the fridge was off. And Gemma was looking at me the way she did when she'd already decided she wasn't going to let me get away with something. Write in the comments. Did I do the right thing by finally saying it? Or should I have kept it inside and protected what we already had? I think, I said, and then stopped. Started again. Every time I meet someone and it's going fine and I'm trying to pay attention, I keep measuring her against the wrong thing. Gemma didn't move. Against this, I said. Against whatever this is. Midnight grocery runs and tea, and knowing exactly how you take your tea without asking. I keep looking for something that feels like this, and then wondering why nothing quite does. The kettle was done. Neither of us got up. Gemma looked down at her mug. She turned it slowly with both hands. Her expression had shifted in a way I couldn't fully read. Not the quick Gemma expressions I'd catalogued over 5 years, the amusement and the frustration, and the focused decision face. Something quieter. Something she wasn't performing at all. Daniel, she said. I know. That's not a best friend answer. No. I looked at her. It's not. The apartment was very still. Outside a car went by, its headlights sweeping briefly across the ceiling. The cooler made a faint settling sound. I've tried, I said. I have. I go out with someone, and she's kind and interesting. And there's nothing wrong with her at all. And I drive home afterward, and the first thing I want to do is tell you how it went. Gemma's grip tightens slightly on the mug. Not in a friendship way, I said. Or, it started out that way. But at some point, it stopped being that. She was quiet for long enough that I started building the exit ramp in my head. I could laugh. I could say that came out differently than I meant it. I could steer us back to the safe version of tonight. The one where we were just two people who'd gone grocery shopping late because her fridge died. But then she said, my last relationship ended because I kept finding reasons not to be fully in it. I waited. I told myself it was timing. That I just wasn't ready. That Ryan was fine, but the situation was complicated. She looked up, but I think I already knew something was off. Not with him, with me, with what I was comparing it to. The thing she wasn't saying was very loud in that kitchen. Gemma, I know. Her voice was quiet. I'm aware of the irony. How long? She almost smiled. Almost. I'm not telling you that. It's embarrassing. I just told you I've been measuring everyone against you for at least 2 years. I know. She looked away. That actually helps a little. Proportionally. I pushed back from the table. Not fast. Not with any particular plan. Just enough to not be sitting across from her anymore. I came around the side of the table and stood beside it. She turned her chair slightly. She was looking up at me, and I was looking down at her, and neither of us was making a joke, which was unusual enough that it felt like its own kind of statement. I have been terrified, I said, of saying any of this for a very long time, because you are the thing in my life I couldn't imagine doing without. Jobs change. Apartments change. People leave or move or grow in ways that pull them sideways from each other. But you were always there, and the thought of saying this wrong, or saying it and having you not feel the same, and then suddenly not having you. I know. She stood up. We were very close now. I thought the same, that I'd ruin it, that you'd go weird, that we'd try and lose what we had and I'd lose my. She stopped. You're what? She looked at me. My person. Something in my chest did something that I don't have a clean word for. We've been so stupid, I said. So stupid. She nodded. 5 years. 5 years of people asking if we were together. And us saying, no. You said not currently to my neighbor. In my head I was being optimistic. She looked at her hands. Daniel, are you going to do something about this? Or are we going to stand in my kitchen at midnight, discussing our failures as people? I reached up and put my hand against her jaw, slowly, giving her every chance to make a joke, or step back, or turn it into something safer. She didn't. She tilted her face into my hand before I'd fully touched her, like she'd been deciding to do that for a long time, and had just made the final call. I kissed her. It was careful. Not because I wasn't sure, but because it felt important not to rush the thing that had been building for 5 years. Her hand came up and grabbed the front of my hoodie. Just a handful of fabric. Just enough to keep me where I was. And that small movement made it real in a way that nothing before it had. When we pulled back, she looked at me for a second. Then she looked over at the broken fridge. I'm going to thank that appliance, she said. Please don't. In my heart, I'm going to thank it. That's fine. Just not out loud. She laughed, and it was the real Gemma laugh, not the polite one, or the social one, the one that bent her forward slightly. I'd always liked that laugh more than I'd been able to say. Now I could say so. This is ridiculous, she said. Thoroughly. 5 years, Daniel. I know. We are unreasonably bad at this, agreed. She was still holding my hoodie. I don't think she'd noticed. I didn't mention it. We made the tea actually drinkable. Hers had gone slightly cold, and mine had gone from warm to theoretical. And we sat back at the kitchen table, but differently now. Her chair was angled toward mine. That was the only external change. The kitchen looked the same. The mug was the same mug. The cracked tile by the sink was the same cracked tile. But everything had a different quality, like someone had adjusted a setting that I hadn't known was available. "Tell me something," she said. "Okay. That birthday. In March, when your presentation ran long, and you missed the first hour of your own thing, and came in, looking like you'd been chased here. I remember. I'd been there. For the whole hour. I helped set up." She traced the rim of her mug. "By the time you walked in, I'd been anxious about you for 45 minutes. Not the party. Just you. Whether you were okay, whether you'd eat anything, whether you'd let yourself feel bad about being late, or just push through it. I pushed through it, I know. You always do." She looked at me. That was when I knew it wasn't the same as regular friendship anymore. Because regular friendship is, I want my friend to be okay. What I felt that night was something more specific. It was, I need him to be okay or I won't be okay. I thought about that night. I remembered being stressed, and then arriving and seeing her across the room, and something in me just settling down, like a background noise turning off. I'd attributed it to relief at seeing a familiar face. I was very good at attributing things. "The drive back," I said. "After Meg's thing in Kensington. The long one where we got stuck because of the water main." She smiled. 2 hours in a car. You fell asleep, somewhere on Bloor. I was resting. You were snoring. I was resting loudly. She tilted her head. "What about it?" "I kept the radio off the whole time, so I wouldn't wake you." I looked at my tea. "Then I sat in front of your building for 10 extra minutes before I got out to help with your bags. Because I wasn't ready for it to be over." Gemma was quiet for a moment. 10 minutes? Maybe 12. "Daniel, I know. You parked in a loading zone. I got a ticket." She stared at me. "You got a ticket and never told me?" It seemed like relevant information to withhold at the time. She covered her face with both hands, and laughed in a way that meant she was also a little overwhelmed. I understood the feeling. There is something specific about finding out that someone has been feeling the same thing you have, from a parallel distance, for years. It doesn't make you feel vindicated exactly. It makes you feel like you've both been carrying something heavier than you needed to. "We should have just talked," she said from behind her hands. "Yes, like adults. Yes, we have graduate degrees, Daniel. I know." She dropped her hands. Her eyes were bright. Not crying, just present, in a way that felt like she'd stopped managing her own expression. "Okay," she said. "So what happens now?" There were probably several meaningful things I could have said. Instead, I looked at the cooler on the floor, then at the bag of Honeycrisp apples on the counter, then at Gemma, in my flannel shirt, at 1 in the morning, in her kitchen with the fridge that had decided this whole night was going to happen. "I think," I said, "we stop pretending the grocery runs are just grocery runs." She looked at me for a second. "That is a deeply mid-level romantic line. I'm working in real time. Fair." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Not dramatic about it. Just placed it there, like it was a thing she'd been deciding to do for a while. "I'll allow it." Her hand was warm. I turned mine over and held hers. We stayed at the table for another hour. She made toast at some point. We talked about nothing in particular, and everything in general. Which was what we always did, except now, there was no part of me managing the distance. No quiet check that I was standing in the right place. No careful calculation of which things I was allowed to say. When I finally left, it was close to 2 in the morning. She walked me to the door. She never did that. Usually just said goodbye from the kitchen, and stood in the doorway while I pulled my shoes on. "The fridge," I said. "I'll call the landlord tomorrow." "Call me if he's useless." "He will be useless." "Then call me." She leaned against the door frame. My flannel shirt was still on her. She was going to keep it. That much was obvious. Had probably always been obvious. and I found that I was completely fine with it. Drive safe, she said. I always drive safe. You go 15 over on the gardener. Everyone goes 15 over on the gardener. That's just the speed of the gardener. She smiled, and it stayed this time, the real one, the one that went to her eyes. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Gemma. I went down the stairs and out into the October night, which was properly cold now, properly midnight cold, and I walked the half block to my car with my hands in my hoodie pockets and the specific, strange feeling of having said the true thing and the world not having ended because of it. The city was quiet. A streetcar was stopped at the light a block down, waiting. My car was where I'd left it. The parking ticket from the night of Meg's thing was not there. Obviously, that was months ago. I'd paid it. I'd moved on, but I thought about it anyway. 12 minutes in front of her building. Radio off. Waiting because I wasn't ready for it to be over. I could have just said something. We both could have, but I don't know. Maybe it had to be a fridge. Maybe it had to be a midnight grocery run and $90 of food and a bag of edamame that's cost like $6 and a raccoon on Palmerston that looked at us like it knew something. Maybe we needed the specific dumb chaos of a Thursday that fell apart in the right way. 2 weeks later, almost nothing was different. That was the strangest part. She still texted me random things at random hours. I still drove too fast on the gardener, and she still mentioned it. We still argued about which coffee spot on Spadina was actually the best. A debate that had been running since 2019 and would probably run until one of us died. She still took fries off my plate without asking. I still carried the basket. But now, when we left the restaurant and walked toward the car, she slipped her hand into mine without making a thing of it, and I held on, and we walked like that down the street, in whatever the weather was doing, which, in Toronto, can be anything, at any time, and I stopped doing the thing where I noticed, and then made myself unnotice. I just noticed. I'd called her my best friend for 5 years, because it was the truest word I had for what she was. It wasn't wrong. It just wasn't the whole thing. It had never been the whole thing. It had always been Gemma. Probably from the moment she handed me a cracker with brie at a mixer I hadn't wanted to go to, and told me I looked like I needed a better story. She was right. I did.